Senator, welcome to America's Newsroom. Good to have you with us this morning.
Thanks.
I want to start with the word that these two opposition leaders, we don't know their fate at this point. What would be your message to the administration in Venezuela?
Well, I think the Trump administration is handling it just right. There's no doubt that dictatorship is personally responsible for the well-being of these two individuals, who, by the way, are been re-jailed, in essence, abducted from their homes in the middle of the night and taken to jail because they put out YouTube videos criticizing the government, if you can imagine that. And that's where they stand. But I think the administration is handling this very well, very calibrated. For every step that Maduro has taken, there's a response from this administration. And as you're noticing, and it's not being reported, I wish more people would be fair about reporting this, look at the regional support for what the president is doing. Chile, Peru, Colombia, Argentina, Mexico, all these Western Hemisphere countries are united following the president's lead on Venezuela. And I think this is something the administration has done very well. And I think, in fairness, for those who like to criticize the president on this issue, people should point that out. It's a bipartisan issue in America, and it's a regional issue of incredible unity, and the administration deserves credit for that.
And with regard to that region, I know you are warning of a potential domino effect if this is not handled properly, that goes far beyond Venezuela and eventually reaches our borders. What should we be aware of?
Well, that's what we should be aware of. So let's say that Maduro is able to hold on to power there and now suddenly stabilizes. You have an oil-rich country that begins to sponsor left-of-center, anti-American politicians in Colombia, Honduras, El Salvador, which is already kind of headed in that direction sometimes, Nicaragua, which is already there. And then one of the leading candidates in the Mexican presidential race in a year is a guy named Obrador, who is a populist, nationalist, anti-American leftist. It would be like having Hugo Chavez on our border. We're not talking about 10 years from now. We're talking about over the next 2 to 3 years, a oil-rich country using that money to sponsor these anti-American leaders, anti-democratic leaders in the region, and suddenly you have 8 or 9 countries down the spine of the hemisphere coming right up to our border, a huge problem for America, narco states creating drug problems, and anti-American states with human rights violations creating a migration problem. So we got to think ahead.
You mentioned the oil there. This country does have great natural resources. They're obviously not flowing to the people. You spoke to them directly, asking them to think about the fact that they're trying to put food on the table. Their leaders continue to gain weight, both literally and figuratively, with each destructive decision that they make. But with regard to that oil, for now, there's not an embargo here in the U.S. on the crude oil coming out of Venezuela. Should there be at some point? Would that be a workable solution?
Well, I think every option needs to be on the table. Obviously, that is a dramatic shift, and it would hurt some American companies for the short term. But I don't think it would have an impact on the Venezuelan people. But I don't think that's the next step to take, but it's on the table. And here's what people need to understand. Venezuela right now is taking what's $1 worth of oil, and they're giving it for free to the Cubans in exchange for the Cubans are sending over security agents to help them, and they're selling it in the world market to places like China and Russia for pennies on the dollar. And so they're getting 40 cents for every dollar in cash. For $1 of oil for 40 cents in cash, they use that money to steal about 7 or 8% of it for themselves, the leaders, and they use the rest to pay the interest on old debt so they can keep borrowing and carrying out this Ponzi scheme and this ruse. So the Venezuelan people, it's been a long time since they have benefited from their nation's wealth and oil.
And you've been speaking directly to them in both English and Spanish, trying to get the message across that the U.S. is not against the Venezuelan people. It's the leaders that we're worried about. But will it ultimately be up to the people there to bring about some kind of change internally? How does this turn around?
And that's what they're asking for, and that's what we're asking for. The only thing we're asking for is that they follow their own constitution. What led to all this is that the president, or the dictator Maduro, canceled the elections. No elections for governor, no elections for president. The National Assembly, their Congress, had an election 2 years ago. The opposition to Maduro took the majority. He basically just canceled the Congress. He basically just ignores the laws they pass and does whatever he wants. That's all we're asking for, is for them to have the elections that were scheduled under their own constitution. Instead, he decided to basically change their system of government, get rid of the National Assembly, and replace it with this Cuban-style fake Congress that they created on Sunday. And if they are seated today, I think you're going to see the Trump administration respond. And if they move in on the Capitol building to kick out the legitimate assembly and replace them with these stooges, you're going to see additional responses from the Trump administration.
Well, and sadly, it's been very violent there. We think about 120 people over the last few months have lost their lives in trying to be part of the opposition there.